ignition switches. On. RPM switches. Set. TD switches. Normal. Doors and hatches. Closed. Light out. Strobe light. On. Restart check is complete. Clear left. Engineers, start number 2. Starting 2. Wind 310, Pilot Project Podcast. Clear takeoff. Runway 31 left.
All right, we're ready for departure here at the Pilot Project Podcast, the best source for stories and advice from the pilots of the RCAF. I'm your host, Brian Morrison. Returning with me today is our guest from episode 15, newly winged RCAF pilot, Scott Harding. Scott, congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Glad to be back, Brian.
Yeah. So before we start, let's go over Scott's bio as a refresher. Scott joined the RCAF in 2007 as an Air Combat Systems Officer, or ACSO, through the regular officer training program. Upon completing his degree at the University of Western Ontario, he was sent to 1 Canadian Forces Flight Training School, now known as 402 Squadron, in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Here he earned his ACSO wings in 2012 and was posted to 414 Electronic Warfare Squadron in Ottawa. After 5 years of flying, he completed successive staff tours as an operational planner with the Air Component Coordination Element, or ACE, in Yellowknife, and then as a senior staff officer for electronic warfare at 1 Canadian Air Division in Winnipeg. 15 years after originally joining, Scott finally made the switch to pilot, and as of 3 days ago at the time of this recording, has completed Phase III flight training and earned his RCAF pilot wings at 3 CFFTS in Portage. Today we're following through on our promise to check in with Scott and hear about his adventures in the flight training program. If you haven't already listened to Scott's first interview on episode 15, I highly recommend you check that one out as well to learn about his background and Phase 1 and 2. So Scott, when I was making this interview, I realized I don't think we covered this the first time around. Where did aviation start for you?
Aviation started for me like a lot of your guests. I was an air cadet growing up.
Okay.
But getting me into air cadets was my grandfather, who flew for Air Canada for many, many years. My mom just sent me a picture of my grandfather, my grandmother. I think it was 1955, black and white photo. And it was their wedding announcement from the newspaper. And they were... Congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Clark, who are going to Portage La Prairie, Manitoba for their first trip as a couple, because Dave Clark is posted to Portage La Prairie for flight training.
No kidding.
1955, yeah. So he was a pilot way back in the day, and I remember stories of him flying Air Canada, flying prime ministers around and all that jazz. That built into me joining Air Cadets. London Air Show was a thing every year back in the day, and loved doing that. And it just kind of built and built and built. I did power and glider as an air cadet, and then eventually went, well, the next logical step is joining the military to fly.
Yeah. So like so many of us, another air cadet.
So many of us.
So here we are. You're done Phase 3. How was it? How was your experience on Phase 3?
It was fast and furious.
Yeah.
The course is short. It's a lot of effort in a really short period of time. So it's only about 4 months long, and you have a test like week 1.5. You're already writing your first exam. Your second exam is like a week later, and then you're right into the sims, right into the airplane, and it's pretty constant. But it was a lot of fun. It was a great experience, great people, great instructors, the cross countries and the mutual flights. All amazing opportunities, and I learned a ton.
Yeah.
I struggled a bit, but I learned a ton.
Okay, I'm really interested to hear about that.
Yeah.
Did you find the learning curve to be steep?
It was. Yeah. Like I said, day one, you do the normal introduction. Hi, everybody. This is, all the people you need to know.
Yeah.
Day 2 was into the books and be prepared for your first exam next Wednesday kind of deal.
Yeah. Even when I came back to do my instructor course, we spend the first couple weeks of ground school with the Phase 3 course, if there's one starting at that time. And it is like, boom, here we go. Get ready for your first exam because it's next week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What were the biggest differences between Phase 2 and 3?
So I know I said on Phase 2, or here in Portage in general, they treat you like an adult, and you're kind of responsible for your own success or failure. It's even more so in Phase 3. I found there was more computer-based training, CBTs, in Phase 3. And it was really just, all right, off you go. Come back in a week and we're going to test you on all the things that you need to know. There were some instructor-led lessons to confirm the knowledge and reviews before you write the test. But it really is the entire course. It's dependent on you and the work that you do in order to pass.
Yeah. And there's a good reason for that too, right? As you can attest to as a AXO and being out in the real world, when you get to a squadron, they're not going to hold your hand. They're going to give you an upgrade booklet and say, okay, we'll see you in 2 years.
Yeah,
You'll
exactly.
get mentorship and training, of course, but it's going to be up to you to complete those things and to take the initiative.
Yep, exactly. So I think it's really good. I think it builds upon what they did in phase 2 in the sense of getting you to be successful on your own. And then this really just takes it the next step.
Yeah, for sure. So can you take us through a day in the life of a phase 3 student?
Yeah, so ground school is very much the same as it was on phase 2. Wake up in the morning, go get breakfast, head into the study lounge, and you're either doing CBTs all day or you're in the classroom with an instructor.
And for the listeners, CBTs is computer-based training.
The difference between phase 2 and phase 3 in the flying portion is more so there's a lot more prep and planning I found for the phase 3 flying. So where in phase 2 there was a little bit of, map prep and then route study, in phase 3 there's a lot of understanding the rules and regs a lot more in detail.
Mm-hmm.
Can I take off today? What's the weather going to be like tomorrow? Is it VMC? Is it VFR meteorological conditions, i.e., is it nice outside? Can I go fly? Or is it IMC, IFR meteorological conditions, wherein I need to use my instruments? Well, we're doing a VFR portion today, so it has to be nice outside. We have to have, 3,000 foot ceilings and 3 miles visibility, that kind of stuff. So understanding those rules a lot more in depth than we had to in phase 2.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more of the decision making is on the students, seemingly anyways. I know the instructors are making all the calls in the background, but they rely on us to brief them. Hey, this is the weather today, and this is what we can and can't do.
Yeah, I've seen that too. My observation has been that obviously the instructor has the final say, like you said, but the students have to take ownership in the process and they have to be actively involved in, like you said, not just knowing the rules, but interpreting and applying them, which is like a whole other level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one thing to know what the words say, but to be able to understand them and apply them is really a key to phase 3 for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of the difference between being able to select the right bubble on a multiple choice test and then actually being a pilot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So when we last checked in, you said that you found the hands and feet to be the biggest challenge of the flying course. Did you find that change in phase 3?
No, it was still the biggest challenge. I mean, when you look at it, I had a bunch less hours than most guys coming onto the course, save for guys like yourself that got to skip phase 1 with the commercial license. But then you already had the experience in order to do that.
That's right.
So for me, it was still the most difficult thing. The difference being in the King Air versus the Grobe. The King Air, we're not doing aerobatics. We do steep turns once in the practice area. And then everything else after that is circuits and normal flying stuff.
That's right.
So the hands and feet were still not a problem, but still the struggle that I had. But for the most part, I was able to get over that by, again, just, doing the chair flying and making sure I can offload some of the other mental stimulation so that I could put more towards the hands and feet.
Yeah. The good thing about that being an issue, if I could put it that way, is it's better than, say, your decision making being your biggest struggle.
Yeah.
Hands and feet will come with time and practice.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So will most things. But I would argue that as long as you're able to, have good enough hands and feet to earn your wings, the rest will come in time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's actually a fairly small problem to have.
And I mean, really, the hands and feet piece was really only important, on landing and takeoff. Not that those aren't critical times of flight, but those were the only times that it was really obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. During literally what are known as the critical phases of flight. So you just mentioned the simulator. Phase 3 has a significant amount of simulation, or roughly about 50%. How did you find that?
It was interesting. A little bit of a change from what I experienced on the Grobe side. The simulator for the King Air has much better fidelity and is actually a certified simulator. So when we did our IFR practice, we were actually getting actual IFR time that we could log. So it was interesting knowing that the first, I think, 18 missions that we did were all in the simulator. And then you go into the airplane and it's like, all right, well, you've already done this 17 times. You should know how to do this. But wait a minute, I've never been in this airplane. So it was a bit of a leap from that. Mm-hmm. But when you look at what industry does, I know a couple guys that are Air Canada pilots and have never seen the inside of the aircraft until their first passenger flight.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a guy that knows what he's doing that's flown a bunch beside him. But, for new pilots in Air Canada, it's the same kind of thing. So the fact that there was a lot of simulation, I think also takes away the weather factor.
Yeah.
It meant no matter what, every single day we could be in the simulator.
Yeah, it gives you great continuity.
Exactly, yeah. So we flew for the first 3 weeks. We were in the simulator every day. And for the sim anyways, we got pretty good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's some things that the sim doesn't do great. You can't taxi in the sim. And basically anything below, 100 feet in the sim is a bit off. It's not perfect anyways.
Yeah.
But all of the airborne stuff is exactly what it's good for.
Yep.
And then the emergencies was the other piece. So we don't do any actual emergencies in the airplane anymore. Everything is done in the sim. So they can do anything they want in the sim because you can't kill yourself. It's all engine failures and, yellow page. So non-critical emergencies, take time, open the checklist and see what's going on, but also all the critical ones like engine failures, engine fires, anything that requires you to take action right away. We can do that all in the sim. And then you don't ever risk the airplane or risk the aircrew.
Yeah. And like you said, this is sort of industry standard. And I think it's something we're going to see more and more in the Air Force. Like it or not, we're always looking for ways to do things with lower cost. And obviously it costs less to operate a simulator than it does to operate an aircraft. As pilots, we all want to fly. We all want to fly the airplane. And I think it's natural sometimes to have a bit of the sim again. But the truth is you get great experience out of it. And you go in with a positive attitude and it can be an awesome learning experience. And like you said, I bet you the progress you folks made in those 3 weeks or so in the sim was crazy. You probably went from literally what's a King Air to I can operate a King Air.
Yeah, exactly. So, we did that 3 weeks of simulator stuff and then jumped into the airplane the next day. And while there's some differences, like I said, I knew where all the buttons were. I knew how the airplane was going to react. So I could basically just hop in the cockpit and go. And there wasn't a lot of get to know you time with the airplane because I already knew it. It was good to go.
Yeah. So the training plan, essentially the curriculum, has changed some since we covered it with an instructor. What are some of the new elements?
So from what I understand from the instructors, the two big new elements, I guess, are mutual flights, which I think we'll get into, and the fact that we don't do all the training in portage anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So from what I understand, the previous training plan, almost everything was done in portage until you do a couple cross countries, and then you come back and you finish off with an iron triangle to Dauphin and Brandon and back.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't do that anymore. So all of the circuit work that we do VFR, we do a little bit in portage just to get comfortable with the airplane, and then we leave. We go to Gimli and Lac du Bonnet. We go to Brandon, Verdun, Russell, all these communities around here that have airports, and we go there to fly for a couple reasons, I think. One, because it forces you to understand different airports, different procedures. You're not always under control. So none of those airports that I just mentioned are controlled airfields like here in Portage. So you're dealing with Brandon Radio, which is just a guy on the ground who you say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And he says, cool, here's the other people that are in the area. Or a Gimli where there's nobody and you have to talk to the other traffic directly. Hey, helicopter over there. I'm over here. I'm doing this. Okay, what are you doing? Okay, now we all know what we're doing. We'll stay out of each other's way, deconflict in between each other. So it was really good for that. And the other piece is you get used to different airfields itself. So if you always land on 31 left or 13 right here in Southport, you're always going to have PAPIs to tell you where your glide slope is.
Right. So which we just Googled, and it's Precision Approach Path Indicator. It's a series of lights. There's 4 of them. They turn from white to red as you're in the right position on the glide slope.
Yeah, so in portage, you always have PAPIs if you're on the outer runway. So you always know what your glide slope looks like. You're always going to have the same shape of the runway. You're always going to have the same length of the runway. So you're going to get used to that. And then you're going to, get into a Herc and go fly somewhere in, Africa, where it's a 3,000 foot runway that's only 50 feet wide. And you have to figure out how to land on that. Mm-hmm. So by going to Gimli, by going to Lac du Bonnet, by going to Brandon and Verdun and Russell and all these other places, all of the runways are different shapes and sizes. Obviously, they're all rectangles, but they're all, 3,000 feet long and 50 feet wide, or 7,000 feet long and 100 feet wide. And it changes the view and it gives us the perspective of, okay, I can't always look for the same picture in front of me. I have to adjust it based on the runway.
Yeah, that's a huge advantage. When I went through, we focused a lot more on steep turn stalls, slow flight out in the area, and then we'd come back and do circuits in Portage, like you said, almost exclusively. And while I think that was a good, strong training course, I do think this is going to set up pilots for a stronger start just through the breadth of experience that they're getting. And also, it's crazy to say, but sometimes you'll run into people, or even you'll find in yourself, you'll get to a squadron, you'll learn to fly this new operational aircraft that's super complex and amazing. You'll have no problem transiting around IFR because you've done a lot of that kind of work. But the first time you have to transit somewhere VFR, or the first time you go into an uncontrolled airport and it's been a while, you got to look up all the rules, obviously, but it can be like, wow, it's a bit daunting. I haven't done this much before. So hopefully we'll have less of that kind of thing going on with this new training plan.
Yeah, we get a lot of really good experience doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of conducting the training.
Yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned this briefly before. Can you tell us what a student mutual is and what it's like to fly one?
So a student mutual is essentially a solo for a multi-engine pilot, if you will. Normally, an instructional trip is you as a student in the left seat and the instructor in the right seat of the cockpit. A student mutual is a student in the left seat and a student in the right seat with no instructor at all. So very similar to what you would have got as a solo on a Harvard or in the Globe. And we have 3 of those on the course now. The first one is just in the circuit itself. So you and your flight partner just go up and beat the pattern a bit, come back down, land, park it, swap seats, and then do it again so that the other guy gets the flying experience and you get the right seat experience. The second one is exactly what we just talked about, a VFR round robin trip. So for my mutual, we went to Gimli and then Lac du Bonnet and then came back. And it was a lot of fun. So it's just you and another student. You guys are fully responsible for yourselves, your airplane, your procedures. And it's really good for building confidence. The last mutual you do after your final test. So it's a weird one in that you're already done. You have essentially completed the requirements to graduate, but you still have 1 flight to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your first quote unquote solo IFR trip. It's on what we call your ticket.
Mm-hmm.
So when you pass your final instrument test, we get an IFR ticket, a license essentially that allows us to fly IFR. Normally, we've been doing that with an instructor under their ticket. Now it's under our ticket. So myself and my partner got the airplane, made sure it was all gassed up, figured out what the plan was, flew off to Saskatoon, did an approach on the way, had lunch in Saskatoon, got the airplane gassed up, paid with the credit card given by the school, and then we jumped back in the airplane and flew back to Portage. So it's really like, okay, we've done all these procedures. I've done this with an instructor a couple times. This is the first time where we get to go out and really do this by ourselves. And it really solidifies all of the training, all of the things that we've done to get to that point to pass the final instrument test. It solidifies all that in like, hey, we trust you to go out and do this by yourselves. Have fun.
That is so cool. I didn't realize that there was a mutual. Like I knew about the mutes that were going to the circuit, doing a round robin. I didn't realize there was an actual IFR trip where you shut down and had lunch.
Yeah.
And IFR, I think we've mentioned, is instrument flight rules. That's just so cool because honestly, it's not something you're going to do until you're an aircraft commander. And even then, depending on what aircraft you fly, if you have a flight engineer or whatever, you're not involved in every single step of that, like the fueling and stuff. So you might not do that until you're back at Portage as an instructor.
Yeah, exactly.
So what a cool thing to do as a new graduate.
Yeah, it was so cool and so much fun to just, get up airborne and then go, wait a minute, it's all on us.
Yeah.
Like there's nobody here to say, oh no, that's what ATC just told you, or no one to, okay, let's do this procedure or this kind of landing instead.
Yeah.
No, it's all you. You get to choose what kind of approach you want to do. If you miss a clearance, you're calling ATC back to say, hey, sorry guys, can you say that again? Because I missed it. It's all on you.
Yeah.
So it's a real good confidence booster, and it was such a cool experience.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. What a boost for your confidence to just really show it yourself like, I can do this. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
That is awesome.
And as far as I know, between my partner and I, we did not lose our tickets on this first flight.
You would know by now.
I think so.
One of the other big adventures you take on phase 3 are 2 multiple day cross countries. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, sure. So there's 2 cross countries, like you said. One is to the US and the other is to Western Canada. So the idea is we want you to get some experience in US flying, similar but slightly different ATC, but they want you to have some experience in that. And they want you to have some experience flying in the mountains. The mountains in Canada, there's no difference in terms of the actual procedures, but you do have a bunch of granite around that you want to avoid. So they want to send you out there with an instructor and give you some time to really get comfortable flying in slightly more dangerous locations. So for my first cross country, we ended up doing the US cross country first, and we went down to Minnesota, Nebraska, and Missouri. So we started the first day, flew down to St. Louis with a stop in Rochester, Minnesota to clear customs. And then the second day, we flew into Minneapolis, Minnesota at the end of the day. That was really cool, very busy airspace.
Yeah.
And then on the third day, we went through Duluth, Minnesota, and then into back into Portage.
Okay. So how did you find that experience?
It was very cool. So it's basically normally what happens when you have a full course of 4 people, 2 students and instructor in each airplane. So one student is flying, the instructor's in the right seat, and then the second student is in the back doing the comms. So talking to ATC, requesting clearances and all that kind of stuff. So the original plan was I was going to be in the back seat at the beginning and then fly the second leg. There was a little bit of shuffling, and if my partner's listening, he's probably laughing about this. But I ended up flying the first leg, and I wasn't totally prepared for that because I hadn't done the planning for that leg.
Right.
But I ended up flying the first leg into the US and figuring out how to clear customs in Rochester, Minnesota. And it was an experience.
Yeah.
I've never done that before. When I was flying the Alpha Jet, I would fly in on Air Canada and meet the airplane wherever it was.
Oh, wow.
So this was really my first time being on board or being in charge of a military aircraft and landing to clear customs. And it was a super cool experience.
Yeah, those trips are really very formative. A lot of learning takes place on those. I would say that in those 3 days, you probably learn as much as like 10 other flights back out of Portage. You're just doing so much and you're seeing so many new things. What do you think is like the biggest thing you learned flying into the States?
So, I mean, really, it's kind of like we said earlier with the simulator missions. It's continuity. So you fly 3-4 days in a row. You do 3 or 4 approaches every single day, and maybe 2 touch and goes or a touch and go and a final landing. So the amount of experience that you get in that 3-day period, you're doing 9 approaches, you're doing probably 6 to 8 landings. All of that together will combine to make you just such a better pilot.
Yeah.
Aside from, okay, now you're talking to US ATC. Sometimes they talk extremely fast.
Oh, yeah.
Procedures are slightly different, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah, just a couple things you have to learn before you go down there.
Yeah, exactly. And they teach you all of it and then test you on it before you go do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was such a cool experience to listen to the ATC, to do all of these approaches. And the approaches themselves are exactly the same as what we do here in Canada. So you're really getting the same experience and the same ability that you're going to have to do on your final test.
Yeah, it's really kind of like the hero's quest where you go out and prove yourself and you come back a different person almost.
Exactly. Yeah. So then the second cross country is the Western Canadian cross country. The design is get you out in the mountains and get you some mountain experience. So we left here, flew through Medicine Hat, and then I did an approach in Castlegar, BC, which was super, super cool. Like you're doing an approach through a valley. You have 10,000 foot mountains on either side of you. So you really have to pay attention to what you're doing. There's a lot of autopilot that we're using at that point. So, okay, the autopilot's going to do what the autopilot's going to do. But if it does something that you don't expect, you got to be ready to take control. So just because the plane's flying itself doesn't mean you're not paying attention. So the Castlegar was really cool. Then we went into Calgary.
Can I ask you a question about Castlegar?
Yeah, go for it.
Were you there in good weather or was there clouds or?
No, it was pretty good weather, which was one of the only reasons why we did it, was because we could go down, do the approach. I think we even did a touch and go that day, and then did what we call a spec viz departure. So essentially you have to climb to a certain altitude visually in good weather before you can enter cloud. And in doing so, that will kind of quote unquote guarantee you that you're not going to hit a mountain as you're climbing out or going en route.
Yeah.
So we had the weather in order to do the spec viz departure. Nice. which was great. It meant that I did do a touch and go and was able to climb up and see the mountains and go, okay, don't go over there because that's going to hurt. And the little King Air is not going to win against the 10,000 foot mountain.
No, I did an approach into Castlegar, which we were only going to do to the low approach because we did not have the weather.
Okay.
And let me tell you, it is a weird feeling when you know there's mountains all around you and you're in cloud and you just have this magenta line on your GPS and you start descending and you're like, well, I just trust that the GPS and the autopilot, we're all in the right place and we know where we are and there's nothing in these clouds somewhere. Like, it is a weird feeling.
It is a very weird feeling. So after Castlegar, we did Calgary for the night.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the next day, we went to Comox, Victoria. And then on the way back from Victoria, we did Kamloops. And it was exactly that. The weather was crap. The clouds were right down to the ground. So my partner was flying the approach. I was in the back seat. And I'm looking out the window going, man, I hope he knows what he's doing because I have no control of this situation.
Yeah.
And I can't see anything other than cloud. And like you said, you're just diving through the cloud, following the magenta line, hoping that things are going to work out. They did. I didn't crash into a mountain and neither did my partner. And back to Calgary for that night. And then we came home the following day.
That's an awesome trip for people listening, just to take a second to think about the geography of that. You guys went from central Canada all the way to the West Coast, to the tip of the West Coast and back, all in this little King Air and hitting all these spots along the way. Like, think about what an adventure that is.
Yeah, 22,000 feet going over the mountains. We flew directly over top of Whistler. I actually have a picture looking down on Whistler and you can see the snow and the ski runs and everything. And then leaving Victoria, we were climbing up. I forget what we were, probably like 21,000 feet going eastbound. And there was a cloud deck and you could see Mount Baker down in the States poking out through the top of the clouds.
Wow.
It was such a cool experience.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, so cool.
So, like we said, your graduation was on Friday. I can still clearly remember getting my wings put on my chest. And I remember that after I marched back to the flight, I kept looking down at these wings, like almost in shock that they were there. It was kind of like, wow, I can't believe I have wings. What was the feeling like when you had your pilot wings put on your chest?
So there were 9 of us that graduated last week, 6 from the Hilo flight and 3 on my course. So I actually happened to be the last person among all 9 of us to get my wings.
Okay.
So I had to sit there and watch 8 other people get their wings ahead of me. And then when they called my name and I marched up and my mom and my dad and my wife were there, my in-laws, my 2 brothers are all there waiting to watch and watch me get my wings. It's such an amazing feeling, such a relief at the same time. The course is short, but it's intense. And getting to that finish line is such an achievement and a relief when you get there and you can finally, like, now I've got these wings on my chest. It feels heavy, but man, I'm so relaxed right now.
Yeah.
And then exactly the same thing. I got my wings, step back, salute, and I start marching off. And I did kind of peek down at it. I looked at all my buddies, the 8 of them standing there behind me that all had their wings on already. And I'm like, man, we did it.
Yeah.
I can't believe we did it. This is amazing.
It is, honestly, it'll rank as one of the best days of your life.
Yeah,
it's so memorable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I hope that alone, hearing that alone, inspires some people to go for it because it's just such an incredible thing. It's such a crazy thing to achieve and so much work goes into that point and then you're there.
Yeah. And for those listening, remember, this was 16 years after I joined the military, trying to join the military as a pilot. I waited 16 years for this moment and just incredible, man. Incredible.
Yeah, that is something.
Yeah.
So now that you've graduated, can you let us know where you've been posted?
Yeah. So we found out the day before. I am posted to 436 Squadron in Trenton to fly the CC-130J model Hercules. It was my number 1 choice, and I am so excited to go do this.
Man, that is so cool. What are you most excited for at 436?
There's so many things, man. Like the travel, first of all, they get to go to some really cool places. You know, the C-17 and the Polaris, they get to travel too. But when it's an airport that's too small to take a C-17 or a Polaris, who do you call? You call the Herc. And in goes the J model to drop off whatever or pick up whatever you need. So I'm so excited about the travel and the places that I'm going to get to go. But for me, the big thing and the reason why I pushed for a pilot transfer this late in my career was because I wanted to be operational. I wanted to be, I say near the pointy end. I know they're not pointy, but I wanted to be near that tactical doing things on the ground kind of deal without having to be on the ground. I joined the Air Force for a
That's
reason.
right. It can get pretty pointy for the Air Force.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to do something operational, and I don't think there's anything other than maybe flying a fighter jet. I don't think there's anything quite as pointy in the Air Force as a J model Hercules. So
Yeah.
I'm so excited to go get to do some of that, tactical airlift, dropping paratroopers, high, low level, whatever, like just to get into it and really be operational. It's exciting.
Yeah. For listeners, we've done 2 shows that kind of relate to this. One was with Sky Simpson on the C-130J Super Hercules. We also, for Remembrance Day, interviewed Mike Hool about his time in tactical airlift, which was at the time on the H model Herc in Afghanistan. And interviewing those 2 people really gained me an appreciation for what that community does, how intense some of the flying is, and just how cool it is.
Yeah. And I've listened to both those episodes again since I got my selection.
Yeah.
And it made me even more excited to be able to go do this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think will be the biggest challenge at 436?
As much as I'm going to love the travel's also going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
I know a lot of the other folks that have come on the podcast have talked about it. You're away a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
There's no tactical airlift into Trenton.
That's right.
It's all away. And so with that, it means I'm going to be away a lot. It's going to be a bit of an adjustment for my family. We've talked about it. I didn't really think about it until they said, hey, give me your selection choices. And then we started looking at it and I went, oh, geez, other than maybe search and rescue, there's no job in air mobility where you're staying home on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is away. Auroras, you go away for maybe a longer period of time, but you're still away a bunch. J model C-17s, there's a lot of out and back trips. So there's going to be a lot of time away. And that's going to be tough on the family. So, I've listened to the spouses episode, and I took a lot of what was said on there from the spouses that you had. And I think that, taking some of those lessons learned will help ease the pain of being away so much. But I really think that that'll probably be the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it's something that's really important to be aware of. There's almost no multi-engine cockpit you can end up in that doesn't end up with quite a bit of time away. SAR, like you said, sometimes you're home more, but at the same time, it comes with a very challenging schedule.
Yeah.
So you're home, but your schedule's all over the place. You do a lot of standby, and a search can come up where, hey, I'm going up to, Iqaluit for the next who knows how long, weeks or whatever. So that is definitely a tough part of flying in general.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
What would you say was the single most helpful tool that helped you succeed in flight training?
So for me, I think the most helpful tool was talking to other people, talking to the course ahead of you to get some information, lessons learned from them, things that they messed up and maybe can help you not make the same mistakes. Talking to the courses behind you, because there's a lot of knowledge in the building in general, and maybe someone else can help you. Talking to the helo dudes next door, talking to the instructors, talking to friends. So one of the guys that was there, and you've already interviewed him, Blake McNaughton.
Mm-hmm.
Blake is actually a friend of my brother's. So when I got to Portage back in January and I met Blake, and he went, oh, you're Scotty Harding. And I went, you're Blake McNaughton. And then we took a picture together and sent it to my brother. Blake and I became really good friends after that.
Yeah.
And I remember a couple times sending Blake a message saying, hey man, I'm really struggling with this. Form was the first one on phase 2. I had a bit of trouble towards the end of my phase 2 with form, and he called me instantly and said, hey man, how's it going? Here's some tips and tricks that might help, but really just, talked me down, gave me a little bit of confidence, like, hey man, you've made it this far, you can do this, but also imparted some wisdom in the sense of, here's some ways that you can get through what you're doing. And he did it again when I was flying night flights. I struggled a bit on the night flying, and he called and said, hey man, here's some things that you can think about. He sent me a couple of videos of him flying nights. So Blake's my example of a really good person to talk to, but we all have those kind of people. And I think learning from others and talking to other people was, for me, probably the biggest tool to success on phase 3 and in flight training in general. Being able to learn from other people and take their knowledge and apply it to your training.
Yeah, no person is an island. And if you try to get through flight training alone, you might be able to, but it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot more stressful, and you're giving yourself a lot of unnecessary pain. I have so many mentors I can think of that have helped me get through really difficult times, either in training or operational flying. Could be just when you need advice on leadership. You know, we as pilots, we get all of our training on leadership through mentorship.
Yeah.
We don't get very much formal leadership training. There's just so many things that you need to rely on other people to help you learn and get through.
Yeah, exactly.
I also think it's important to acknowledge that you did have a couple spots where you struggled. And it's important for people to hear you will have times where you struggle in flight training. You will have flights that you fail. That doesn't mean that your time is over. It's just time to learn from it and reattack.
Absolutely. And we've talked about mental resiliency before, and I know that that came up on a couple of your podcasts. That mental resiliency is key because you're going to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
I know one dude who graduated a few courses ago who never had any failures throughout his entire training. And good for him. Great on him. But that's, he's the outlier.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else at some point is going to struggle with something. And maybe it's hands and feet for me, like it was on form and mineral landings was the other thing.
Okay.
And night flying. And there was a couple things. But, it was critical to have that mental resiliency. And I won't lie, I struggled with it.
Mm-hmm.
When I failed my my pre-test for clear hood phase, I did some ED, some extra dual for it, and it wasn't sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really, really angry. Not at my instructor. He didn't do anything wrong. He's just evaluating what I'm doing as a student. I was angry at me because I knew I could do this and I still struggled. And so for me at that point, I was breaking down and I went back to what I know best and went, I'm just going to go for a run.
Mm-hmm.
And it was chilly outside, but not cold. And I just went for a run. And I think for the first 600 meters, I was running 3 minutes and 30 seconds per kilometer, which is ridiculous. That ended after about 600 meters. But the whole point was I got out there and I released a lot of that stress and a lot of that anxiety and anger. And that for me, that's one of my outlets. And you need to know what that outlet is because you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
And you need to know how to make it through that struggle.
Yeah. I would also say it's probably good to struggle while you're in flight training. You mentioned some people make it through without failures. I was lucky enough to be someone who made it through without failures, but I think that actually set me up poorly I didn't learn how to deal with adversity until I was on an operational squadron. And that's a hard place to learn that.
Yeah, because you're gonna be maybe not fail an upgrade flight or something, but you're gonna be put in a situation that is gonna have some adversity to it.
100%.
And if you haven't had a chance to work through some of those demons already, then that could be detrimental to your performance. So not suggesting that anybody should try and fail a flight so they could feel adversity.
No.
But it is a good experience to have.
Yeah, I think what we're saying is embrace it as a learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you do run into that situation. And I did personally, all cards on the table, I did need some extra training on one of my upgrades on the Aurora, and it was a hard pill to swallow. And I really wish that I had to learn that lesson earlier. I did learn it. I had great mentorship at the time and I got through it, but it's tough. So hopefully you learn those lessons earlier and you move on and, you just keep on with learning and growing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. We are down to our last 3 questions already. They're going to be our standard last 3, but we're going to kind of tailor them to your flight training experience. So what was the most important thing you did to keep yourself ready to succeed in flight training?
So studying for sure, staying in the books, like I said, for phase 3, the rules and regs and being able to understand and apply them was huge. So just reading the book once wasn't good enough. So really getting in the books and getting back in the books. So, you study a bunch for the simulator phase and then you just go do a bunch of VFR flying for a while. And then you're back in the simulator to do IFR. Well, you still need to know all those IFR rules. So you got to get back in the books and restudy. So studying was one of the big ones. Make sure you stay in the books and stay current with what's going on. But then just having that outlet as well. Make sure that you're not always in the books. Make sure you're not always prepping for flights. You have a way to relax and separate your mind and relax your body.
Now that you're a qualified pilot, I'll ask you this. What do you think makes a good pilot?
I think being humble, and I think some of your other guests have said this, but being humble, being willing to recognize your mistakes or recognize the spots where you're going to struggle is critical. Because if you go into it thinking that you're the best thing since, Maverick, and you think you can do everything better than everybody else, you're going to struggle. And maybe it won't be in the cockpit, but it will be personality based.
Oh, yeah.
So you need to be humble enough to recognize that you don't know everything, that you're not the best, and maybe you are the best, but you need to be able to step back and go, hey, I'm still willing to learn from whoever I'm talking to. I think being a pilot, especially in the RCAF, is a constant learning experience. And if you're not willing to continue to learn, then you're going to miss it. So being humble to know your shortcomings and make yourself better.
Yeah, I like that. And even you mentioned, even if you are the best, every course has a top candidate, but like you said, there's still so much to learn. Everyone has something to learn, and you'll see people who are on squadron who've been in that community for decades, and they're still learning, and they might learn something from you even that you bring through that you learned in flight training, some trick you've learned or whatever. Everybody's constantly learning. So even if you are like the top candidate of your course, you've still got tons to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You've been the senior course for a while now in the multi-engine section of the school. As the senior course now leaving the school, if you ran into someone just arriving to start their flight training, what advice would you give them?
Talk to the people ahead of you. Talk to the guys ahead of you. Make sure you stay in contact with the guys that are leaving. The course that's behind my course hasn't even completed their clear hood test. So they haven't even made it to that automation IFR phase yet, which means when they get there, they're going to have all these questions. And I'm sorry, but we're not there to answer them. So make sure you got contact with guys and talk to the people ahead of you, because they're going through all the same struggles that you're about to go through.
Mm-hmm.
When we went into nights and I struggled, I went and talked to the course ahead of me. Hey guys, what did you do? How did you get through this part? Both, not sleep deprivation, but a little bit of not being at the top of your game because you're flying off your circadian rhythm.
Yep.
Like, how did you get through that? How did you adapt to, not being able to see the airport as well? Talk to the people ahead of you, because they know the struggles that you're going to go through and might have ways around it. So if you're showing up in Portage right now, talk to the people ahead of you.
Yeah. And also the people who have just finished a course, like you won't meet anyone who has been in the books as much as those people. Like they've just worked as hard as they possibly can to achieve this crazy thing. So they're going to know their stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Scott, I know that you're on leave today, so I really appreciate you taking the time to drive to my place from Winnipeg to do this interview. It's really cool to check in with you and see how the next phase of your flight training went. And who knows, I'd love to connect again once you get some training under your belt at 436 and just hear how things are going there too.
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. Yeah, you got my phone number. Give me a call.
Okay,
happy
buddy.
to do it.
Awesome. All right, that's going to wrap up our chat with Scott about Phase III Multi-Engine and life as a student. For our next episode, we'll be diving into the world of RPAS, or Remotely Piloted Aircraft Systems, and how we use the IAI Heron in Afghanistan with Carson Choi. Do you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard, or would you or someone you know make a great guest for the show? Or is there a topic you'd love to see covered on the show? Please send us an email at thepilotprojectpodcast@gmail.com. We'd like to thank you once again for joining us for our first official full-length show back. This was recorded back before Christmas of 2023, but we've got lots of fresh content coming your way, so stay tuned. With that being said, as always, we'd like to ask for your help with the big three. That's like and follow us on social media, share with your friends, and follow and rate us 5 stars wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Keep the blue side up. See ya!
Engineer, shut down all 4. Shutting down all 4 engines.